Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Assalamu alaikum. Welcome to Newsroom. I'm your host Khalid. But today is the 10th of Muharram al-Haram, and of course, because of the importance of this very day, our whole show is dedicated to the importance, the philosophy behind it, and the impact at that time and in this day and age of what Imam Hussain Razillah Ta'ala anhu and his 72 family members and companions stood for, and how important is it to understand what they stood for and why they stood for. Against the tyranny of Yazid. We've been joined by two important guests in this show as well. Let me introduce them to you one by one. We've been joined firstly by Sayyid Saqlain, Haider Saab. He is a development practitioner, but of course he has another point of view on Ashura, and we'd like to understand what he thinks of Ashura and Muharram al-Haram from a development perspective as well as a religious perspective. And then we've been joined by Tayab Nawaz Malik Sahab. Tayab Nawaz Malik Sahab is an Islamic scholar. So thank you very much to have joined us. Let's begin with you, Saqlain Haider Sahab. Ashura literally means 10 basically. And today is the day the whole family and companions of Hazrat Imam Hussain Raziyallahu Ta'ala anhu were martyred because they stood against the tyranny of Yazid, martyred because they stood against the principles that were anti-humanity, that were anti-social, and that were anti-religion. Looking at that day, looking at today, what has changed?
Well, I think, thank you so much first of all for inviting me on this program. It is an honor for me to speak about someone who has stood against the monarcho-fascist regime of Yazid, and someone, when he looked at it, that the supply chain of justice and human values was broken, and no one was ready to confront the regime of that time and ready for the consequences. So let's look at some of the fundamental questions that one can face in his her life. So what do you do when you see injustice happening? Do you like to change it, or do you walk away? What do you do if you see wrong, and would you like to run away or
confront it
or change it? Or what do you do when you are in a leadership position and people are looking towards you as a role model, and somebody who is a son of the Prophet? So would you not would you then take an easy option? Of course not. So these were some of the fundamental questions that Imam Hussain was facing long before.
But you know, that's very interesting to see, because you know, Hazrat Imam Hussain who never took the easy way out, went for confrontation, wanted everybody to understand that he and his companions and his family friends stand for what is right and will fight against what is wrong till death. And this is exactly what happened on this very day. Tayab Nawaz Malik Sahab, when you look at this day and when you look at the confrontation against the wrongdoings in the society and the wrongdoings that you see around you, but in this day and age, you, as Saqlain Sahab also said, you kind of turn your face around nowadays. You say, all right, this is not our issue, not our problem, we should not get involved in this. But at that time, Hazrat Imam Hussain got involved in something for the entire humanity, for the Muslims, and also left a message of courage, forgiveness, and patience. When these three messages are repeated in this day and age, is the relevance as important as it was those hundreds of years back?
Alhamdulillah Rabbil Alameen wa salatu wa salamu ala khatimul anbiya wal mursaleen. Amma ba'd, fa'uz billahi minash shaitanir rajeem. Bismillahir rahmanir rahim. First of all, I am thankful to you for inviting me in this program, wherein we shall talk about the noble personality of great Imam Hussain, who established such an example of sacrifice, justice, and standing for the rights of humanity, and such example can never be competed or contested till the day of judgment. In fact, the philosophy and the goals behind this whole episode of Karbala gives lessons which are the beacons not only for the Muslims of the world, but are for the followers of others faiths as well. So, if we go through the in deep according to the goals which were goals of the Imam Hussain, that are the goals which are the goals of today, and every person of the society, whether he is Muslim or he is not a Muslim, he has to follow those rules, those lessons, and those goals for the betterment of the entire society, world, and the peace of the world. So, if we see about the goals and the lessons which were taught by the Imam Hussain after having such a intensive hunger and thirst for the many days, and even then fighting for the justice and fighting for the rights of the public, fighting for the principles of nature and justice and the free and fair access to the justice. So, these were the goals which normally nowadays we are facing, like forgiveness. We all of the society have forgotten such.
We never forgive nowadays. At the smallest of things,
so
we
just imagine that
kind of keep on the flame of hatred high against the
just
other
imagine that even during the battle, where on one end there is a army blinded with the wealth and the weapons, and about 30,000 soldiers are there, and there are only a few Muslims, about less than hundreds. But even in that battle, Imam Hussain settled such an example of forgiveness that when Mahur bin Yazid came and sought the forgiveness, when he realized that he was doing something wrong, or he asked for the forgiveness, that Imam Hussain forgave him. And that was such an example that if we for the sake of argument, if we imagine ourselves, we are fighting in the streets for even as low as for the 100 rupees, and secondly,
we'd steal for it, we'd sometimes even kill for it. And this is what I don't understand when we look at what Hazrat Imam Hussain stood for. I mean, despite whatever conditions his family or his companions were, he still stood for what was right.
Yeah. Secondly, patience. And we have forgot the patience, and that is the problem of our entire society, especially our country and our public nowadays are totally without the patience. And Imam Hussain, during that battle and that injustice, while he was standing against oppression and oppressive ruler, a sinner, the dictator, but he was filled with the patience. And these are the true and basics lessons which we have to understand and which we have to adopt for the
easier said than done, Tayab Saab, to be very frank. In this day and age, when you look around you, even in your family and your friends or your neighborhood, you don't see those values anymore that used to be present those hundreds of years ago. And that is why Islam was a shining religion at that time, because we stood for values, and values that were enshrined by the sacrifices also made by Hazrat Imam Hussain and his companions. Saqlain Haider Saab, as a development practitioner, for the society to develop, for any society, Muslim or non-Muslim society to develop, how important is it also for these principles that were enshrined as per the sacrifices laid down by Hazrat Imam Hussain and his followers? How important are they also to be applied in some form so that society develops in a much more constructive manner?
Well, you have made a very good question, Omar Saab. In fact, you have rightly pointed out in your earlier conversation that Imam Hussain was an inspiration not only for Muslims. He is an inspiration for all the mankind and for all the professions. And me having a background of public finance and management, if I look at it, I look at it in this way, that one of the points of the charge sheet against Yazid by Imam Hussain was the misuse of public funds. And you can relate this to Pakistan, where the successive governments got changed with the pretext of corruption. So when we say no, absolute no to corruption, we basically follow Imam Hussein's path.
All right. All right. But you know, there's not only that, is also the fact of patience, there's also forgiveness, there's courage. You know, these are also three very important elements that were present therein, but not present as much or as with as much prevalence as it should be. Because for us to move forward, I think, for us to develop as a nation, as a society, it's important for us to be courageous, to stand up to what is wrong, for us to be patient, to understand the perspective of the other, whether he or she is wrong or right, and try to counter that in a patient atmosphere and environment without being agitated or using foul language. A thing that we see a lot on social media nowadays, a lot on the media as well, and in personal conversations as well, and also forgiveness. This is also something that we lack so much, that for a very small thing, you have said that there's something that has hurt me. Instead of confronting you and forgiving you and talking it out, I'll keep that grudge with you, not for one day, not for 1 week, but for years and years, and that will aggravate, and that will change into feuds, that change into feuds between families, between friends, between companions, and that is what creates rifts in societies, that are based on Islamic principles. And Islam that never teaches us to have these rifts. What should be done in order to change the whole angle of where we are going? I'm not talking just of our country, I'm talking of the whole world, because we see that entirely in the whole. We see the conflicts, regional conflicts, conflicts related to religion, what is happening in Kashmir, what is happening in Ukraine. And you know, there is a lot of those principles that could be applied, that were applied all those hundreds of years ago, and a lot of conflicts could be resolved.
Well, I think, Omar, this Imam Hussain is a uniting force. It is not a name of dividing people. I mean, it's a uniting factor among the Muslims. Allow me to say that Hussain and Karbala is a cross-cutting theme across all the sects of Islam and even beyond Islam. So it is a uniting force rather than dividing, first of all. Secondly, I think what we need to ask, you know, when we have understood different characters of Karbala, the way they have displayed their sacrifices for Islam, now it is time for us to look back and ask a question to ourselves: what should I do when I see people suffering in Kashmir? What can I do when I see people moving from Syria, Iraq, Afghanistan in search of shelter, food and security? I mean, there is a learning for me. And I see, and I mean, I should ask, what should I do when I see women and children crying in the hands of the state terrorism of the apartheid state of Israel? So these are some of the lessons that we can draw from the event of Karbala and Imam Hussain.
Tayab Sahab, when you look today in the world perspective, you see so many Yazids, you know. Unfortunately, I have to say, because Yazid is what stands for all that is wrong in the society, all that is evil in the society. And I'm not restricting it to our religion, that is Islam. I'm trying to talk globally, irrespective of religion or caste or creed. Are people no longer having the courage to stand up to tyranny like Hazrat Imam Hussain stood for all those hundreds of years back? What has compelled us to become so passive? I'm talking not only here, I'm talking worldwide.
Look, if we see the concept and the lessons behind the martyrdom of the great Imam Hussain and his sacrifice and the sacrifice of his companions, we learn that the Imam Hussain taught us that to achieve a big success or to achieve a big destination, you have to pay a bigger sacrifice. And he also taught us that while you are going to achieve such a big goal, you have to face the problems, you have to face the difficulties, but never to violate the path showed and dictated by the Almighty Allah and the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. Secondly, the thing which you were asking about, that the Karbala is the constant source of inspiration, revolution, determination, courageousness, freedom, standing before the evils, fighting against the evil beliefs, standing against the dictators. So, this is the thing that we have to realize, and this should be described in such a manner in our education system, in our social system, in our even at the level of our home level, like while we are sitting among our children and family, we have to discuss such thing that that symbolic and the acts which were proved and expressed by the great Imam Hussain, that these basic things are the needs of the day, and the only by following such examples and only following the footsteps of Imam Hussain, we can have a peaceful environment, not only with the perspective of Islam, but the perspective of the other religions as well.
All right. So, yes, Saqlain Sahab, when we mourn during the month of Muharram, especially during the first 10 days, when we take out processions during the last 2 days especially, and also on the Chaliswa on the 40th day, not only does it inspire the millions and millions of Muslims across the world, it is also a kind of reminder of what happened all those hundreds of years ago. But the pain that goes through all of us when we see that, when we are part of that, is that a catharsis? Is that a reminder, or is that much more?
Well, I think Imam Hussein's the greatest problem of Imam Hussain was not the miseries that he went through during those days when he was camped in the desert of Karbala. The real problem, or the problem of Imam Hussain, as per Dr. Ali Shariti, who said that it was the silence of people not turning up in support of Imam Hussain in the numbers that were required.
Or were expected.
That, yes. And let me allow, as Tayab Sahab has rightly pointed out, that Imam Hussain alayhi salam has also taught us by his sacrifice that this is a true path in all history. Do not mind the inadequacy of numbers. At the end of the day, it is the quality which counts, not the quantity.
And the determination and the compassion and the passion with which people move forward.
Exactly. And if you look at the Karbala, you know, everything that could have helped Imam Hussain was against him. The judges, the administration, the caliphate, the army, and the general people who were under fear or greed were silent.
True.
So, Imam Hussain alayhi salam has taught us that against all these odds, success is still possible.
That is true. Success is always possible, Tayab Sahab, and this is what the incident at Karbala, the month of Muharram, especially the last 2 days, remind us of. It is also a test, I feel, of a lot of people of those days who stood up against tyranny, and it is a test and a reminder for people who do not stand up to what is wrong in the society in this day and age. How much of that test do we understand? What do we understand when somebody like asks you, what is the 9th or 10th of Muharram, what is Ashura to you? What would be your answer? What would be your first thing that comes to your mind?
Basically, the day of Ashura from the beginning of the universe has a very special significance, and that most of the Islamic heavily described events were taken apart on the Ashura 9th or 10th, mostly of 10th of the Muharram. So, the second thing that the sacrifice of the companions, sacrifice of the Imam Hussain and his companions give us a reminder on every year. So, if someone asks me about what according to your question, so I will must guide him and assist him that the problem which we are facing in our country, if we go through being a practicing liar, which we see the problem in the society. In fact, the Islam is a religion which describes the matters and rights and duties before the birth of a child, after the death of a person. But unfortunately, what we do, if there is a husband, he takes only the hadith which supports his version. Wife takes hadith which supports his version. Labor takes the only hadith ke wo मजदूर की मजदूरी पसीना खुश्क होने से पहले, and the employer takes the
whatever helps him,
only that version. Similarly, in fact, the theme, the goals, the orders and the lessons behind this great sacrifice, which even could not be imagined for a time being, that how a few people without the weapons, facing the hunger and thirst, are facing
still stood up despite the tyranny and thousands of people.
Till the last Imam was there, and how the ladies could be all alone over there. So, we do not understand the lessons, and we do not understand the themes behind those lessons. We only in these 10 days, and especially in these last 2 days, we just memorize those sacrifices, and on 11th Muharram we just forget
everything, and for the rest of the year we forget all those principles.
And similarly, when any other event or any other day come as per the inspiration of Islam, we goes towards that, like Rabiul Awwal or other than like Muharram, we fill the mosque, and on the first,
like I was hearing the sermon today, and one of the preachers was saying that we come to prayers for Friday, we come to prayers for Eid, and the rest of the prayers we never come to the mosque. These are just small things, but the implication is very universal of all of that. The implication is that you need to follow a certain set of rules and regulations, and also stand up for what is right, and what is wrong, you need to fight that one way or the other. And that is what the month of Muharram stood for. That is what Hazrat Imam Hussain stood for, basically. Also, Saqlain Sahab, there is one thing that we see a lot in this society. There is a lack of courage, when you have, for example, a big exam in front of you, whether it be on the educational arena, whether it be in the form of an interview, whether it be by confronting anybody in the family or friends, you're always afraid. You don't have the courage, especially even if you're right, you don't have the courage to stand for, and the other who's wrong will always have more courage than you. Looking at that example of what Hazrat Imam Hussain stood for all those years back, this is one of the prime examples that one could just follow, and then stand up for even your rights, even small things like going to any place, and if you are denied the right to anything, you can stand up and you say what you are doing is wrong. We no longer have that courage to do that as well. How can we bring back that courage, thinking of Muharram, thinking of the sacrifice and the principles that Hazrat Imam stood for, Hazrat Imam Hussain stood for?
You're right. I think I keep on saying that if the people of 61 Hijrah did the things that was right, they would not have been so illusioned or disarrayed generation after generation for doing the things right.
All right, that is so true. You know, do the things right, be always on the right path, whether it be in your life, personal or professional, or whether it be in the way that you follow religion. And I think it is irrespective of religion. And I think the Ashura today, the 10th of Muharram, and the month of Muharram and the sacrifices by Hazrat Imam Hussain are not restricted to Islam alone as a religion. I think, and I personally feel that a lot of the West follows the same principles, and that is why we see them flying high and being so successful,
exactly.
because they are following what is right. They are on the righteous path, despite the fact they are not from our religion, but the principles that they follow are that of our religion. And irrespective of that, there are so many other Muslim societies that do not do that, despite the fact that their religion teaches us the simple facts and figures, and incidents such as that of Ashura teach us also the same thing. How can we bring about that same commitment, that same resolution, that same resolve in the people of today?
Well, we need a proper guideline and a proper education system supporting our Islamic history, Islamic teachings, and competing the needs of the era, like scientific needs of the era, medical needs of the era. So, we need a comprehensive and formulated education system for bringing such revolution which you are asking about, that we need to bring training, and we need to bring revolution from the grassroots level, because if we see the peoples are divided into different modes and different
much of polarization in the society.
The peoples are divided in different school of thoughts. So, keeping it aside, peoples are divided even into different thoughts on a very universal thing as well in our society. So, we have to make such a plan, and our planning commission and our think tanks and the peoples who are some like well educated and can play their role, they must come.
But like I think the change needs to come from yourself first. It needs to be individual, then it needs to be societal, and then it needs to be governmental. You know, if you yourself cannot change yourself as a person, then you cannot change the people around
exactly you. That the change comes from ourselves first of all. So, that is the reason if we see the Islamic teachings by the Prophet ﷺ and Imam Hussain radhiyallahu ta'ala anhu, he himself along with his family, close companions, stood there against an evil, against an evil dictator, against some oppressions. So, he proved himself that the time will come with the passage of time,
that people will understand the value of the sacrifice and the value of the principles that he stood out. Final question, I want just one sentence from the both of you, beginning from you, Saqlain and Haider Saab. What is Ashura to you?
Ashura, I think, is a revolution, is steadfastness against the tyrannical regimes, a tyranny itself, and it is basically a jihad against
all that is wrong,
the oppression and the wrong that you see.
Exactly. And what about yourself, Tayab Saab? What is the significance of Ashura, if I had to ask you in one sentence?
The self accountability.
Okay. I think that is a very important term, and I hope that people understand the term and the importance of what you just said, self accountability, because all the other accountabilities start with self accountability. Once you better yourself as a human being, then you can change the entire society and the entire world. Thank you so very much, Saqlain, Haider Saab. Thank you so very much, Tayab, Nawaz, Malik Saab. Ladies and gentlemen, today on this very auspicious day of Ashura, we are reminded time and again not only of the sacrifices rendered by Hazrat Imam Hussain and his companions and his family, but also the principles that they laid down at that time through the sacrifices that made. It was just not the sacrifices, it was the whole set of principles for which they fought for against the thousands of people of Yazid, the representation of evil and wrongdoing in the society. If we were to change anything, we need to change ourselves first, and everything else will subsequently change. Be a better human being, fight for what is right, be forgiving, be also courageous to stand up for what is right and against what is wrong. That is what Ashura is all about. Allah Hafiz.